Good. We're going to get going because that's what we do at the appointed time. Thank you everyone for coming, especially on this gruesome day. So it's really delightful to see people who've actually made it out and taken the effort and time to come here. Also, by the way, on a personal note, overjoyed by the fact that the TV schedulers at the CW channel have seen in their wisdom to move my favourite TV programme from Monday nights to Sunday nights. Supergirl is now on Sunday nights, so I don't have to worry about the fate of the Girl of Steel as I'm presenting here at the Collective. So that's as maybe. We've got a very full agenda here tonight, so I'm just going to move on as quickly as I can so that the speakers and presenters have lots of time. Thank you for coming. This is the Austin Blockchain Collective monthly community meetup. Happens here at Capital Factory on the third Monday of every month. I hope it will continue on the same day in 2019, but we're just going through the spiel and contracts with Capital Factory to do that. Thank you to Capital Factory as always for their great support of allowing us to be here. If anyone wonders what the Austin Blockchain Collective is, our mission is to put Austin on the global blockchain map, and we're going to do that by showcasing, advocating for and nurturing the blockchain and crypto companies here in Austin. 120 and counting right now in the city, companies with a presence here. So it's really growing, and we're finding new ones pretty much every week. They're the important information. The website. If you go to the website, you can kind of find out everything we do. There are pointers there to the blog, to our meetups, to our Twitter, etc. If you tweet, if you like tweeting, use the hashtag #AustinBlockchain because someone will like it and retweet it without you having to do anything. And this month is an important month in our calendar because it's Austin Blockchain Month. There were already like 3 events happening in October in Austin to do with blockchain, and so we've added a few more and kind of built it up into a bigger and better thing. I've got a slide about that later on, I think. Actually, maybe the next slide. There you go, next slide. So yeah, there's actually 11 things happening in Austin to do with blockchain. We've done 4 of them, got 7 more to go. There are some of the ones which are coming up. Actually, one not on there because I wasn't sure it would happen, but it is happening. Is 2 days' time is the Ethereum meetup with Ron Resnick from Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. You need to go to their meetup group to find out where it is. I think it's going to be at Techstars, but Carol, who's running it this week because Eric's off in Switzerland or something, is going to tell you all. But there's actually interesting on next Sunday here, I think next door, is going to be the very first Tezos meetup here in Austin. So if you're around for that, come along. Then the following week, the University of Texas is running a showcase with some of their research showcased and some of their students, what they're doing, and what they're doing with some Dell Medical School stuff and the School of Law. So that's a morning showcase on the 23rd. All of these are free to go to apart from the Texas Bitcoin Conference, which is on 27th, 28th. You can get a small discount on that if you type in the code ABCC. It's a really good lineup of speakers. The following day on from the conference, the Texas Bitcoin Conference, there are 2 things happening. During the day, there's an IEEE event to do with blockchain and healthcare being hosted over at Dell Medical School in the afternoon. And in the evening, we've got a town hall, our second town hall and company showcase. And we're going to have a few new presenters there. There will be some presentation. There'll actually be a short presentation by South by Southwest, and a man coming along that will probably give out another ticket to that. And we will have a company from the UK which is setting up here in Austin called Omnitude, are going to be presenting, and Wanchain will be talking about interoperability. And we're going to have a section about supply chain. We've got a little announcement about blockchain and supply chain in Austin there. So you've got to come along to that because it's going to be awesome. Next up, we love doing this. We love doing blockchain programs for you all. We wouldn't have it any other way, but we've got day jobs and wives and children, and in my case, dogs. And we have to pay our rent and our dog biscuits, which is why we are very thankful, dog biscuits for my dog, that is. And we're very thankful that we have support from the community and love to have more support, but certainly got support from Wanchain, who's been with us from the beginning, from NEM, who's a blockchain platform which has set up their North American HQ here in Austin, and from a company called 212, who will be hearing from the founder of that. Are you a co-founder or a founder? I don't know. In a short while. Also thankful to some other companies who are also providing both financial and in-kind support. 10 Capital, who ran the ICO forum at the beginning of this week, and Joshua's Pouch Points, Karen's Kilroy Blockchain, Vault Wallets, a new one. Is Corey here? Where did Corey go? Oh, yeah, there. So thank you to Corey for coming on board. Do you want to go up and say 30 seconds about something? Anything?
Sure.
Yeah, come on. Don't use the microphone, because we're streaming. We're streaming on YouTube and everything, yeah, so just between you and the internet.
Corey Siegel, I'm a co-founder of Vault Wallet. Early on in the year, we saw a need for adoption to occur outside of the heavy crypto trader users, a need to improve the user experience and the security around the wallet. This alone this year, 1.1 billion in cryptocurrencies was lost due to error-prone aspects that are human errors, you know, from spoofing and so forth. And so essentially we developed a wallet that allows for you to have a great user experience. It's like a Venmo for blockchain, or like a Google Pay for blockchain. We'll be going to beta next week, and look forward to, it'll be on the Google Play Store, first Google, and then iOS will come out next after that. That's our first vision. Our second vision is to go into establishing sovereign identity and then sovereign data, so that essentially you, the individual, can return that security back to yourself, and that you will maintain the security very easy, like we would at your house, actually owning your healthcare information that you're allowed to actually have and store on there, ID information, passport information, and having that hardware encrypted. So they literally have to come there and physically beat you up for your phone to decrypt that information and get access to it. So if you think about fraud from credit card perspective, when you have to sign using a hardware signature to actually be able to secure your information securely, it basically decentralizes hackers. They can't remote come in here and take your actual information and decrypt it. So that's pretty much our vision and goal in those three phases. But we're first starting off as a multi-currency wallet to support payments and cryptocurrencies on the blockchain. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for your support. So, okay, I'm going to move very quickly on with just the agenda for tonight. We'll start in a minute with probably about 30 seconds with some shout-outs. From the audience. There'll be a short presentation from a very good old friend of mine and business colleague, Duncan Johnston-Watt, here all the way from Scotland. If you want to know why the weather's so bad, he brought it with him. Yes. And then we've got a presentation from Dave Ektari from ERC Dex, which is a company here in Austin. I think Are you still based here in Capital Factory? Yeah, good. And then we'll have a discussion about the ins and outs of security tokens and token offerings with Dustin. Gonna, well, probably needs no introduction, but so we'll get to that, and we'll have a discussion between us, find out what he's doing with his new company 212, and hopefully get lots of questions and potentially answers. And there'll be some further networking, and we can go to the bar downstairs afterwards. But let's begin with shout outs. So, firstly, are there any other meetup groups here, people who do other meetups that want to talk? Yeah. Come. Yeah, come shout.
Hey everybody, I'm Nicole and I run the EOS meetup. So we're going to start getting more BPs to fund the meetup so that food and drinks are going to be free, so people will start coming. We're also working with Telos, who is forked off the EOS.io, and I'm going to have some of the guys make some cool videos that will show what they're doing exactly, and we could possibly do a live stream with them from across the globe if anyone's interested. So I'm working on that right now. So come see me at the end.
Thank you. And also, there is actually an EOS block producer here in Sound now, Aurora EOS, and they want to come along and help you guys and do some more. So we'll talk afterwards. But yeah, they're very interested in doing that. Any other meetups? No. Any other shout outs? Anything but ICOs and STOs hard selling? You're here from Miami, yeah? Miami. Yeah, I wish I was in Miami. There you go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Evelio Medina. I run the Miami Brickell Chamber of Commerce, but I got hit about 11 months over the head with the word blockchain. So what I do is put people together. So I'm doing something called the Blockchain America Summit in Miami, November 25th to the 28th. Following up, doubling down. During Art Basel, I bought Blockchain Basel, so we're putting art and everything else on the chain. I got some brochures. You guys, believe it or not, your word is getting out over there. I mean, we just did something. We put 3,000 people at Blockchain Shift. So I'd like for you guys to do, what do we need? Speakers, we need sponsors, we need attendees, but I'm committed to helping Pete and obviously Dustin and everybody else here to get blockchain out there. We need a lot of people to collaborate. So thank you for having me, and I'll pass these out. I'm here with the National Minority Supplier Development Council. We have 7,000 people here. All the major corporations are here tomorrow, and you're talking about supply chain from Walmart to everybody is at a convention center. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Any other shout outs from people doing things, people needing help, professional or otherwise, hiring, anyone hiring?
Hey guys, you'll hear more from me later about what we do, but right now we're looking for some help on the marketing and engineering side of things. Do you have a question? Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's it. Yeah. Thanks.
Good. That's Nicole. So yeah, talk afterwards. Anyone else for anything? Okay. I'm going to hand off to Duncan for his presentation. He's going to be talking about his company called Blockchain Technology Partners, but even more about what he is doing with something called Hyperledger Sawtooth, which I think is actually a very interesting project within the Hyperledger kind of ecosystem, but kind of the thing that which I actually personally, I'm not just saying this because Duncan's standing here, I actually think it's going to be bigger than Fabric, and I'm probably going to get killed by IBM for saying that. Going to hand you off. I'm going to try and take my laptop off without killing it. Do you need power? Okay, yeah. You got power. There's my power. There's a microphone. Okay. there's some power.
Thank you.
And you should be able to do the, yeah, you can, there, wow. Thank you.
Okay.
That was a very seamless transition. It always worries me when Pete says, keep it short. So this is normally a 2-hour presentation. Well, it would be if it actually came on. There you go. One second. No, it's me. It's operator error. So. No, I just turned it off. I'm going to try and turn it on again. So. Okay, well, at least you can see that. So. I do apologize for this. Hold on one second. Well, actually, if I... Of the 20 minutes I'm now wasting, God knows how much. Try and get rid of that.
Yeah, that would be it.
Jeez.
That's easy, that's a map. Very easy. Off you go.
Right, okay. So I guess that's 18 minutes left. So good evening, and yes, I'm Duncan Johnston-Watt. I'm the co-founder and CEO with a company based out of Scotland called Blockchain Technology Partners. The clue is in the name, I guess. But in terms of what we're doing today, I'm going to give you 3 slides on the company, then talk primarily about Hyperledger Sawtooth. Who's familiar with Hyperledger as a... Good, excellent. Okay, so hopefully when you say Hyperledger, there's not that unconscious or subconscious bias towards Fabric, because oftentimes people are saying Hyperledger and they mean Fabric. Fabric is one of 5 frameworks. I'm going to talk about another framework within the, quote, big tent, within the Hyperledger sort of organizational movement. And then hopefully do a demo. And the demo will be really us showing you how easy we think it should be to spin up things like Sawtooth networks, because frankly, you can spend too much time bogged down in the weeds, and what we really want people to do is actually get on and use these frameworks and develop applications, because without that, it's just middleware at the end of the day. So I've just called out here the Linux Foundation. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Hyperledger is one of the collaborative projects within the Linux Foundation. And another very important one is CNCF, or Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So without further ado, so our value is really, as it says here, bringing the benefits of blockchain to business. So I'm very much here talking about the middleware, the technology, not about specifically crypto or Bitcoin or anything like that. And I'm pleased to say that some of the fog is clearing and people are no longer associating the two as being synonymous, because that has in the past caused a little bit of a headache, probably not amongst you guys, but amongst the general populace. So, the real goal of the company is to provide a platform. And when we say platform, we mean something that is curated. So if you're familiar with Cloudera or Hortonworks, which are now one company, interestingly, and what they did with Hadoop, or you're familiar with what Red Hat did with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which came out of Fedora. It's the same idea. It's trying to package things, curate things. Curation means select, organize, and deliver a guaranteed experience. So I'm not saying you can't all, and in fact we can all go and just read the manuals, spin up things, do it ourselves, but that doesn't get you very far if you're in business. So we want to provide a platform that people can then use and innovate on top of. So I'm going to talk about or demonstrate something called Sextant. So Sextant is really a window on our world. It's going to provide you with a view of both how we spin up Kubernetes and then how we then layer a Sawtooth on top of that. So really the point about being a member of both Hyperledger and CNCF is we see there being a very powerful combination of things like Hyperledger Sawtooth running on and being deployed on Kubernetes. So I assume you're all familiar with Kubernetes? Yes? No? Okay. Originally developed by Google, it's essentially a container orchestration platform. It was contributed by them to the CNCF, which meant that it now has a governance framework. So CNCF is another big tent collaborative project within the Linux Foundation. What that means is it's home to not just Kubernetes, but also Prometheus and a number of other projects. So the goal here is to provide a platform that's now, I would say, the de facto standard for container-based orchestration. So a container, if we're going to go down this rat hole, is typically represented by a Docker image, and then at runtime it becomes effectively, think of it, a very lightweight virtual machine. So you can have lots of these. They can run amok. You can use Docker Swarm or Docker Engine to try and control them. But Kubernetes gives you the ability to do that in a very crisp and very sort of constructive way. So, and the idea we see is presenting this through channels like, so Corey talked about making his product available through Google, through the marketplace. We see very much the same thing for software now, that the obvious place to place it is in something like the AWS Marketplace or Google Cloud Platform Marketplace, places like that. Why? Because we don't really want to give people software anymore. We want to actually provide them with the ability to spin it up in a cloud. So that's us. So Sawtooth 1.0. 1.0 is now about to be replaced by 1.1, but these slides are some I cherry-picked from Dan Middleton's initial deck. So Dan, who works for Intel, is one of the leads on the Sawtooth project within the Hyperledger community. And I've just realized I can look at that monitor, so I'll stop turning around. So obviously Fabric is something I'm sure you're fairly familiar with, or a lot of you have heard of. So Sawtooth is, to be very clear, a direct competitor. So one of the things that I was at the membership summit recently, and we were trying to work out how do we present to the world the fact we have this big tent philosophy, and we have a number of frameworks. Well, one, Hyperledger Indy, stands alone because that's contributed by the Sovereign Foundation. So that gives you the basis for self-sovereign identity. So it's the open source behind that, the software behind that, I should say. But there are a number of other frameworks. Fabric and Sawtooth are going to go head to head. So it's not the case that they're in this ghetto or that ghetto. They are basically offering alternative platforms. Platforms in the sense of they will give you the ability to develop not just smart contracts in the case of Sawtooth built around Solidity, but also custom smart contracts in any sort of language of choice. So I'll go into that in a minute. One of the design philosophies which I want to call out here, actually two, top right and bottom left. One of the fundamental philosophies is to maintain the distributed nature of a DLT. Now that might seem a little weird to you, but if you actually delve into Fabric as an architecture, it's not as distributed as it first sounds. So there's a service called the ordering service or orderer, which actually breaks the notion of it being self-similar. So a distributed system, to be distributed, is self-similar. Everywhere you go, it should look the same. And then the other thing is really separating out development from deployment. So I'll get into the detail of that in a second, but essentially it's the separation of what's happening at the network layer from the application layer. And it doesn't get more complicated than this, I'm pleased to say. So what we have here is clients. So without clients, it's not a terribly interesting world. We have a notion of something called a validator, and then a set of transaction processors on the back end. And this pattern is repeated everywhere. So what does that look like? Well, if you're familiar with a client-server architecture, that's pretty much all it is. Now, there's a few subtleties, but the good news is that means if you're a developer, a great deal of your experience can be translated or transposed or brought with you into this new world. Delving a little bit deeper, if you look at every host, there's a REST service. So clients talk through that, and I'll show you that running hopefully in a few minutes' time. And there is not just one, but several transaction processes that are hanging off the back of each validator process. Go a little deeper, and all we're doing is delving deeper into this same pattern. So clients, transaction processes, and then the validator network in the middle. And one of the things that, or the aha moment for me, was what the validator is really doing is two things. It's looking after the global state and the blockchain. And conceptually, they're, if you like, two sides of the same coin. So the global state is the state here and now. The chain is really the description of how you got here. So if you think of it as the complete history of that state. So all of that is happening down at the network level. And the really clever thing is that the validator has no idea about the business logic that's happening over here. So what that means is everything it does is opaque. So it's very hard to break into that, because even if you look at what's going through the network, you'd need to know what the business logic was to actually understand it. One of the other things is they say parallel scheduling. What I'd rather call it is optimized scheduling. So because you've partitioned the world according to these transaction families, then you can be smart in terms of what you can and cannot process in parallel. It's really hard doing this in 20 minutes rather than, so sorry if I'm gabbling. The transaction processes, and I'll come to a special case of Seth in a second, can be written in any language of your choice, which is, I think, another one of the attractive things if you're coming at this from an enterprise background is, again, those skills translate across by and large. And then the special case, and I think this is one of the standout things about Sawtooth itself, is it does provide you with support for the Ethereum virtual machine. This came from another framework called Burrow, and what it allows you to do is, if you've been used to working with Ethereum and Solidity and Remix and Truffle, Truffle cracks me up every time I say it, but that's just I'm of a certain age where I just can't take these things seriously. But anyway, Truffle from a sort of a CI/CD point of view and Remix from an IDE point of view, these are standard tools in the toolbox if you are an Ethereum developer. So the really cool thing is that you can actually just take all that knowledge and transpose it into a private permissioned network. One of the other features which I quite like is there is a settings TP transaction processor, and what that does is ensures that every change made, every configuration change made to Sawtooth is itself stored on chain and voted on. So that's quite important when you're changing or tuning a network to be able to have an audit trail of all the decisions that are taken. And finally, and it says here Asterisk coming soon. It's now actually here with 1.1, but there's a pluggable consensus mechanism. So whilst Sawtooth started with something called POET, proof of elapsed time, and a proof of elapsed time variation based on the SGX Intel chipset, it's now far broader and has far broader appeal as a result. So development. I've sort of alluded to this already. The three things you've got to think about are the actual messaging. So this is standard asynchronous messaging between a client and, quote, server. The business logic on the back end, and then the data model itself. So one of the really important things to bear in mind is the data model is no different to the data model for any application, other than you've got to decide what's critical data that you need to store on-chain and what's ephemeral or can be stored off-chain. So there is a little bit of a nuance there, but essentially, as I said before, you're bringing with you all your skills and just learning that little bit extra in terms of the state management itself. And then finally, before we get to the demo, what this should also tell you is validators are dumb. Transaction processors are opaque because you register as a transaction processor, and if you're allowed onto this node, then yes, you are now connected. If not, you're thrown off. But then all that you get are messages saying, apply this transaction. So the validator knows it's for you. So there are 3 bytes that direct it at you versus another TP, but it has no idea of the payload. And then all you do as a TP is get or set state. So very clean separation between the network and the validators, which, as a set of peers, handle the global state and the chain, and what's happening within the business logic itself. So, demo. One final thing, and this is taken straight out of the developer's guide. This is as complicated as the architecture for Sawtooth gets. So you have validators, you have a network of validators, they talk gossip, they use the 0MQ messaging bus in order to do that, so standard stuff. They have a set of TPs hanging off them, they have a REST API, and clients come in. So, and that's what I mean about something being self-similar. Everywhere you go, it's the same. So now comes the demo, moment of truth. And we're going to play tic-tac-toe. So, anybody know how to play that? Hopefully everybody. It works in Shanghai, Singapore, Hong Kong, so hopefully Austin too. So we'll find out. Okay. Good. Right. So, and of course, as is customary, here's one I made earlier. So the only difference between what I'm showing you now and what will be available in a few weeks is that the AMI that I spun up, which essentially is the host for Sextant, is a private AMI at this point in time. So what do we have? It's so simple, it's falling off a log. You have the ability to create new Kubernetes clusters, or you can bring your own. So we'll start one here. And hang on. Is that okay? Okay. So there's, if I go back then, so at the moment it's a really, really simple interface. It's designed to be simple because it's designed to get you up and running very quickly. So we don't want you to get too bogged down in the details, but essentially behind the scenes, we are going to either, as I say, bring your own, or in this case, create a Kubernetes cluster for you. So dev1. And again, this is the AWS experience, so you can pick a particular region and then select, master and nodes. And that's it. That's all you need to know. So it will then go off. Okay. No, I'll tell you what it is. It's because US West 3, C, A and B are okay, C, yeah, so what's happened here is, yeah, and so, damn it, I always do this. So, are we streaming? Good, all right. Never work with CEOs, animals or children. Anyway, so we'll try with Oregon, and if this doesn't work, there is one I made earlier. So, by the way, that I had reported that issue. So, but hey. So now if we go, so rather than wait, because that does take. I mean, if you've ever tried deploying Kubernetes, we're using kops behind the scenes. Essentially, it's going to take the time it takes. So it's a one master, three node cluster. But fortunately, here's one I made earlier. And so if you don't believe us, you can download the kube and the kops config. So in other words, just as with the Kubernetes as a service that AWS, Google, Azure, and Alibaba are now providing, it is a bona fide Kubernetes cluster. There's no fudging. That, by the way, was a big plus when the cloud providers started doing this, because the container services were all over the place. But I was pleased to see when they started offering Kubernetes as a service, it is genuinely Kubernetes. You can interact with it yourself using kube, CTO, etc. So what we're doing here, again, it's stupidly simple, is just giving you the checkboxes for standard TPs that are available. There will be an ability to drop in here your own TP, because the whole idea of this is to give a developer a very fast turnaround experimenting. So we're at the moment writing a workshop, which we're doing in Singapore in 3 weeks' time. So by then we'll have this at a point where a developer can actually iterate fast through it. But right now we're just going to deploy this cluster. And what's that doing? If you just bear with me a second, it will actually come back and we can see. But basically, we've got a set of standard pod definitions and stateful set definitions. This is all Kubernetes speak. But essentially, as you can see here, there are a number of predefined services and then stateful sets. Monitoring is something that comes out of the box with Sawtooth. What's good about that is that it lets you look at the actual Sawtooth network. Next is role-based access control, and then we're saying desired and current targeting 3 validators in this very simple network. And as you can see, if you look up there, we've already got one of those has come up. So 2 out of the 2 containers. The reason there's 7 containers here is that's basically the standard set plus whatever you selected in terms of additional TPs. So, and again, to reassure people that this stuff is, we're not fudging anything. If you're used to looking at Kubernetes through the Kubernetes dashboard, you can do that. But more interestingly, I would say, arguably, is you can also look at it through the world of Grafana, or we'll be able to in a moment when that comes up. So, so Grafana talks to an influx DB, which in turn the validators talk to, which just give it a few minutes, which allows you to, as I say, debug the network as you're working on it. So, and then, how much time do I have? In which oh, well, that's obvious, because I've never done 2 Grand Prix in a year. I was at Singapore a couple of weeks ago, and I just randomly said to Pete, hey, it'd be nice to talk at the Austin Blockchain Collective sometime. And he said, well, why don't you come next week? And I was meant to be in Shanghai, but I got shanghaied by this guy. So I came over from Singapore last night, or Saturday night, I lose track of time. But anyway, I'm here because I want to see Lewis Hamilton win the World Championship, which I think he's on track to do as long as Vettel is 3rd or worse. So this assumes, of course, that Lewis Hamilton will win. But having said that, I've now jinxed him probably. But anyway, yeah, I'm a huge fan. So yeah, it's almost come up. So I'm waiting for, yeah, it's up and running. So now I'm going to try and grab that, which is horrible. Yep. How is this priced? So obviously what we're doing is working with open source. So, we're doing something you could pretty much do yourselves. So it's pay-as-you-go pricing, and the way it works in most of these marketplaces is you're paying for the fundamental cloud, and then there's a markup on top of that. And the unit we think we're going to charge for is the number of pods under management. So because a pod is a thing that we've helped create. But again, the markup isn't going to be huge. If you get into production, our business model says at that point, most companies want a production SLA. So then you can talk to us. So it's it's both low touch going through the marketplaces, plural, and also we think it should be low cost to get you to really experiment and exploit the technology and not worry too much about, you should worry about your Amazon bill, by the way, and use things like Miserbot, which is what we use to try and control costs, because these costs can. Well, we're not giving them away. The way it works in the marketplace is it's spun up on your account, not my account. Well, this I can spin up and tear down so I'll have to do the maths, but basically, it's roughly it depends on whether you run M4s or not. I mean, but so I don't have the AWS price list on me, but I'll get back to you on that by the end of. But
Trying to give everybody an idea, because one thing we talk about a lot is, what does it cost to run blockchain? How much does it cost? Enterprise customers ask it all the time. They're like, okay, what if we bring up a distributed ledger? What is that going to look like for us? Well, in this case, you're offering a lesser cost option than, some doing it themselves or things like that. You spend the time to think through the management themselves.
yeah. So yeah, if you run it for any significant period of time, so we're not discounting AWS nor AWS discounting. So at the moment, we're using PVCs, which is a Kubernetes persistent volume claims. The default when you're just doing development is spin them up, tear them down. But obviously, if you're going to run and rerun, then you. Well, we do not recommend in production you run in a single Kubernetes cluster. So the Kubernetes cluster is if you like just a unit of deployment. So, and if you're running in a consortium, obviously, then everyone will want to have their own cluster. So yes, yeah, no, I understand. So we're not using local volumes. We're absolutely not using local volumes. So if PVCs are, yeah, but I'm running this cluster over 3 AZs, but I can run multiple clusters over multiple regions, and we would recommend that. So it's the same. What happens if a node goes down anywhere? I mean, it's not the end of the world. So. Mm-hmm. If there's no replication going on there, if there's not storage, hang on. If there's no replication, I'm not trying to do replication here. I'm running Sawtooth. So basically, what that means is every one of those validators has the same state. So I can run as many validators as I need across many AZs, across many clouds, regions, you name it. So why on earth would I want to replicate? Hang on. So time out. We can run across multiple regions, we can run across multiple clouds, and I would never ever run a single cluster in production, period. I'd never run in a single region, period. So one of the interesting things is applying that logic to Fabric as opposed to Sawtooth is, if you've ever tried running the order across multiple regions as a ordering service, good luck, Right, so boom, Sawtooth I think is massively more scalable because it is something you can distribute. So I would always say, you have to do whatever you're comfortable with in terms of, the resilience, but at a minimum, multiple regions, not just multiple AZs within a single region, which you could see I was doing there for a given one cluster. But also, if you want, run across multiple clouds, because it's our job to then do the networking under the covers for you. And the only thing we're avoiding at the moment is encouraging people to do stuff on-prem, although I was with Google in Singapore on Friday, and they were saying, well, actually, we can do GKS on-prem. So I said, well, that's more interesting, because now it's something we know, we understand the environment, versus the moment you say, oh, yeah, you've got something approximating to a cluster running on something approximating to some hardware that's approximating to something, it's a weak link. So I think we've been quite religious about use cloud, but use it intelligently. So
right. use cloud intelligence.
Yeah, don't assume the cloud is going to save your bacon, because if you do, I mean, that's when things go really wrong. When you hear, because I mean, most of the big players, even Netflix got hit one time by because it was a storage issue, right? But in the main, they've built, and Adrian Cockcroft, a good mate of mine, has built a very resilient architecture which assumes failure. I mean, they invented Chaos Monkey. Chaos Monkey will go around and just randomly, kick over stuff. So it's a good way it's not a good way of testing anything, but it's a horrible way.
Okay. We're going to move on. I'm taking you two for a beer on Wednesday, by the way, so you can fight it out in a bar.
It's you.
Okay. Where is David Aktari? Where are you? Going to get back to some reality now. David, come and talk a bit about what you're doing with ERC Dex and where you're going and all that. And then after you've presented, we will have a discussion between me and Dustin about security tokens. You okay?
I'm great.
Great, super. Go.
Do we have a different laptop to show?
He can probably kill. Yeah, I'm not sure what I've got. I might have something for
Do you mind if I just use your browser? Thank you. So, private keys are right here, right? All right. So my talk is going to be decidedly different. First of all, my name is David Aktari. I'm the CEO and founder of ERC Dex. Who knows what ERC stands for? A couple of people.
Yes. Okay.
Somebody say something.
Ethereum recommended change. Is that what it is?
Close.
Ethereum request for comment or request for change, and it is let me back way up. Who knows what Ethereum is? Everybody, hopefully. Okay, good. We got the right audience. We named this thing ERC Dex because we are based on Ethereum. We are focused on Ethereum. We believe that Ethereum is going to be sort of the future of finance. And while I hear Bitcoin maximalists chuckling, there are absolutely issues with throughput and transaction rate and all of that. We believe that it has the best shot at doing what needs to be done at some level for the foreseeable future until a better solution comes along. So we'll put it that way. Why DEX? Who wants to tell me what a DEX is? Decentralized exchange. So, thank you. And instead of just shouting out, I'm going to call on people individually here. What makes a DEX a DEX? Who wants to take a shot at it? Okay. Frank. Individual custody of assets. So it's non-custodial, right? The exchange does not custody anything. Okay. Anybody else? Bulletin board order book style. Okay. There's no liquidity. Excellent. Thank you. I see we do have people who have used DEXs in the past. Okay. Anybody else? What was it? Unregulated. Thank you. That's a good one. So I'm going to start with that last one actually. Unregulated. We believe strongly that is not the case, and we think that the people out there that do think that is the case are going to be in for a very nasty surprise very soon. So. We take a very pro-regulatory stance because we've seen what regulators will do if you don't. and they've already begun saber rattling and issuing subpoenas and things like that. And we think it's only a matter of time before they start going after the trading platforms. So we are very pro regulation. So the reason I asked why do people I asked people to give me their individual answers about what they think about DEXs, what makes a DEX, is because it tends to be different for everybody. And what we've found is that the most important thing was actually the first thing that was suggested, which is non-custodial. And people tend to be flexible on everything else. In fact, they would rather not have the low liquidity. So we're working on that one. But things like the order book, the bulletin board order book, that happens to be one of the loopholes that some of our competitors are trying to sort of hide behind and say we're not regulated just because we're a bulletin board. I think both market forces and regulators are going to come around and say this is not going to work, either because we're not going to let you or because from a marketplace standpoint you're just not sufficiently performant, and so it needs to be more interactive. So how many people here trade and understand trading in general, either through stocks or crypto? Okay, so a fair amount. So one of the things that he brought up with that bulletin board point is that some of our competitors use a limit order book, which just means that if you have token A and you want token B, you place an order for token A for token B at a certain exchange rate on the order book, and that exchange would be very hands-off, not manage it, and somebody else can come along and take that order and submit it to the blockchain, and it settles peer-to-peer, thus being a DEX, non-custodial, all of that. What we've found, and we actually were that style originally when we first built this, but what we found is that it's very poor performance, and the most embarrassing thing that you can see as an exchange in the traditional financial world is an exchange that can get turned upside down, and where you actually have inverted markets. And I've had hedge fund managers, major hedge fund managers, literally laughed when they saw that our markets could get turned upside down. Meaning there are orders sitting on the book where people are willing to buy at a buy at a higher price than someone is willing to sell for, and those orders are resting on the book, right? So those orders should have been matched and taken off the book immediately. So if you start doing that, you are no longer a completely passive bulletin board, right? So these sorts of dynamics are going to come into play. Anyhow, I'm getting way off my original plan of talk, but I wanted to talk a little bit about DEXs because I've spoken at a number of conferences. I just got back from New Zealand. I'm about to head off to Prague, and the two themes that I keep hearing and have heard in the last year and a half or so are DEXs are the future and tokenized securities are the future. And we are trying to take both of those head on. But it takes some finesse and it takes some explanation of what it is that we're doing, because we're not a traditional DEX. How many of you have used EtherDelta, the original EtherDelta? That was described to us by our beta testers as crawling across broken glass to trade on a non-custodial platform. And because horrible things can happen. But if you're a purist, and if you really believe that you need to totally decentralize all the things, you want an on-chain order book, you want complete anonymity, you want what EtherDelta was. That's the standard by which you hold all the DEXs. And we learned that based on that feedback from what people said they experienced on EtherDelta, that's not a long-term plan. That will not work, and it certainly won't work in a regulated market with the expectations that come along with it. So we flexed on some of those things, right? So we don't have an on-chain order book. We do manage the order book, but we don't flex on the custodial thing. So anyway, this is all background information for me to start talking to you about where we're going. This is all where we've been, what we recently did with the re-engineering to more actively manage the order book, and then where we're going with security tokens. How many of you have plans or have already participated in a tokenized security sale or plan on doing one yourself or anything like that? Few people. Did you do it using one of the standardized protocols that are still mostly being developed? But I know Securitize, for example, has a standard. Polymath, Harbor, these latter two, I think Polymath now actually is, I think, putting product out. But I'm curious, anybody in the audience have any experience with any of those? Yep. Templum, yep. Right. Right. But so Templum right now, I don't believe is trading anything, are they? Oh, so they're doing underwriting right now. Okay. Yep. The Reg D lockup or whatever, the 1 year lockup. Yep. So BCAP should be coming out of its lockup soon. So Blockchain Capital was one of the first ever tokenized securities. It's being ported, I believe they're porting it over probably by the end of this year to the securitized standard. And it probably will trade on Templum. I know Open Finance is going to support it. We're supporting it. Spice VC is another one I think that will be on the securitized standard. Honestly, I asked the question because I don't know what Polymath has put out, if they're putting anything out. I'm curious if people in the room do know. And sorry. And also the same question actually for Harbor. Anybody up on what Harbor's been doing lately? They've been super tight-lipped, but they made a big splash early on. They raised $10 million right out of the gates from Dave Sachs and then went totally silent. So I'm just curious. Okay. Anyhow. So I really do believe that tokenized securities are the future. We are not going to be focused on underwriting like Templum's doing. We do have broker-dealer partnership, and we're going to be doing secondary trading. First things first, we don't have our KYC and AML in place. We have agreements there, but we haven't implemented yet. We had this recent re-architecture to be able to do those things. But yeah, that's coming. I guess I'm probably running up on my time here. Any questions or comments? Yeah. We are so we've partnered. Well, we have partnered with a broker dealer here in Austin actually, and we're filing our own BDATS paperwork. I get to take the Series 7, 24, and 63. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is we're non-custodial, right? So we could try to pull some of the stuff that our competitors are pulling. I think, especially when tokenized securities get into the mix, it's going to be a lot harder to make that argument. So I just said, let's bite the bullet and go for it. And at a minimum, we're an introducing broker. At a minimum, like I think there'll be, we probably will be able to get away with being a nickel BD, if you know what that is. Non-custodial. It's minimum capital requirements. I think that's probably the path we're going to go, but we'll see. I mean, we're doing our Form BD right now, and we'll find out. I mean, it's the Wild West out there. BDATSs are getting snapped up for way more than they should be because everybody knows that you have to have it. Everybody's getting serious about this stuff. Great question. Oh, yes. I meant to address that when it was brought up earlier. So it is absolutely a problem. I think, again, there's going to be a confluence of dynamics that'll fix it, just like there are a confluence of dynamics that'll call the market of those that think they can get away with not being regulated. And we have a product in development right now that is, I actually heard the previous speaker mention an on-prem Kubernetes thing. We actually have an on-prem solution that we think will help solve some of the liquidity issues. So two big things are happening. One is institutions really want KYC and AML. They need the regulation, right? They need compliance with regulation, all of that sort of stuff. So there aren't that many DEXs out there that have KYC and AML. In fact, I can't think of one. So we're going to be probably the first. So that we've already talked to like the guys at Cumberland and a few other funds that said, when you have that, let us know and we'll come in and play ball. But more interestingly, I think, is the rise of institutional custody. So when you have institutional custodians coming into the field, money moving into those custodians, which they will do, and we can give them a proprietary solution that ensures that their custody clients can have liquidity for those funds that they're custodying without introducing any exchange risk whatsoever. That's a really interesting proposition for them. And so we're calling that our on-prem solution. We're going to come up with a better name for that, but essentially it's you know, if you were to go on ERC DEX and trade using your MetaMask wallet, the analog there would be an institutional client going on to ERC DEX trading from their custodian wallet, right? There's just some middleware that we kind of put in place there, and it just kind of works. And so we as the exchange don't have any exposure there, but the custodian gets to maintain the funds in their wallet, and the client gets liquidity if they want to be able to trade that for something that isn't an internal trade within the custodian, right? So that, I think, will be really interesting, because now you're talking about huge block trades with zero exchange risk coming through.
So just so I understand the mechanics, so it means you're going to have each party is going to have their order. It's going to match inside of your book and then go out simultaneously, unlike either Delta where you would go click on an offer and that offer might or might not be valid.
Right.
Right? And so, you know, that offer would sometimes time out, you know, depending upon how much gas they put in.
Right.
How much time they run. So the orders are automatically going to get swapped. So you'll never have that lock.
You'll never have that. Right. So especially with our most recent update, and I can, if you want the technical details, I can go into it with you offline, but our most recent update eliminated some of the big concerns that a lot of people had. So we are a 0x based trading platform, if you know what 0x is. And the version 1 of 0x had a lot of concerns about the ability of miners to front run, for example, or different collisions that could happen. With our re-architecture based on 0x version 2 and some of the things it allows us to do, all of that's eliminated. And so you have a much better trading experience without sacrificing the most important thing of the custody, or being non-custodial for us. Any other questions? Yeah.
How do you see it playing out with the liquidity issues that seem to be, at least in the short to medium term, really hard to solve, which is as you start creating these security tokens, you already have like limited liquidity across all these utility tokens.
Mm-hmm.
There's thousands of these things, and you know you're the bid. I mean, after this huge spread, there's all these problems. So as we start adding more and more assets on it, like what's your vision for how this is actually?
We're bringing in a new class of player, right? So you come from the finance world, you know that funds have mandates, right? And they can't play outside their bounds, or they'll get in trouble with their LPs. So if, you know, since the beginning of finance, there have been funds out there with specific mandates to invest in specific asset classes, right? So what's coming into the market now in blockchain is actually a traditional asset. It's this private equity that we're giving liquidity to, the Reg Ds, the Reg As, all of these that have had next to no liquidity in the past. So now we're bringing in those assets and giving a much larger pool of investors with a very specific mandate to only invest in those things, a way to do so quickly, right? So to me, we haven't begun to see the influx of money. There is a wall of money that's going to be coming into this. It's trillions of dollars.
I guess my big question is, how long is it going to take? And this is, like you said, this is kind of where I live all the time.
Sure.
How long do you see, as you're talking to some of the different providers of this, is it going to take them to be able to onboard clients, to get
A lot of them have already started dipping their toes in the water. So the ones that are sort of more forward thinking have already tried experimenting. Most of them, maybe it's a dirty little secret, I don't know. Most of the traders out there, most of the fund managers trade PA. They trade on their own account at home personally, whether if their fund can invest or not, depending on the asset class, they still trade on their own. So they know how these markets work, they know how to get in and out of them. And so if now we give them an asset class that their fund can participate in, now they're trading a much bigger amount, right? So I'm pretty bullish on this space specifically. Bots. The question is how bad is the how bad's the HFT? So we are never going to be an HFT venue, right? Bots, we're already seeing most of our volume is driven by bots. It just is. So algorithmic traders are going to be there and they're going to dominate. That's just generally going to be the case. But it's not going to be an HFT game. Go all the way back to the beginning of the conversation when we said, well, it's Ethereum. It's going to have some transaction issues. Having said that, we have a product in development that will give HFT-like trading capabilities using state channels. That's probably not going to be out till early next year, but it's going to be there. And so if there are HFT folks out there that want to play the game, we can give them something to play with. But yeah, it's going to happen. This is all computers. It's going to. Yep. Mm-hmm. The lockup time period, you mean? No, and that should, and this is something I wanted to say earlier when I asked if people were involved in the actual issuances of security tokens, is make sure you're using a standard that is going to be open and enforce those regulations at the token level, right? So the three that I mentioned earlier, Securitize, Harbor, and Polymath, all should. I should also mention Verified Token Standard is coming out. I was just in New Zealand, and there's a global group of folks that are working on putting that together. I would encourage you to look into that. But it should be handled at the token level, and so it's a non-issue. I mean, and when it. Oh, right. I see what you're saying. Yep. My personal theory is that the saber rattling and the guidance that we're getting from SEC is going to force everybody into Reg A+. That's where I think everyone's going to go. It's more expensive, but Reg A Plus doesn't have a lockup. You can raise $50 million. You can do general solicitation. You tack on a Reg S registration with that, and now you can go global. To me, that's where everybody's going to go. That's probably what we're going to do for our Series A.
So that's probably a good segue into the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
I'll leave that up.
Sounds like you've got a lot of stuff under development.
We do.
So you'll be back here.
Yeah. Oh, and we are currently live. Let me be clear. We are currently live. So if you have an Ethereum browser on your phone and feel like doing some trading, app.ercdex.com. Do it. Yeah.
Have you got something?
Let's put our website up.
Why? I've got a much better.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. So I'm sure we'll have Dave back here to talk more about his future plans. So we're going to move on to the main, the entree, as it were, which is a discussion with Dustin from a very new company. He's going to talk a bit about the company and what it's doing, and let's see how we are. Yeah, let's bring this up. So this is a fireside chat. So I thought I'd bring a fireside up, okay? I mean, Yeah, thank you. So, good. Dustin, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Pete?
Oh, I'm coping. It's great weather, isn't it? You brought.
Yeah, we could use some real fire here,
Yeah,
actually.
that's right. So okay, so let's get going. So you're the CEO of a new company. It's been in stealth. It's out of stealth. It's called 212. What is it, and why is it called 212?
Well, I'll start with the latter. The naming came from this idea of being a positive catalyst for change within both the blockchain and the larger financial services industry. And 212 degrees is the temperature water changes state and boils. And so 212 is our name. We're positive change agents.
Okay. So.
What do we do? Is that
Yeah.
So we're sort of a turnkey security token solution. At this stage of the industry, what we see is just a significant need for both people that are helping like right at the front end of the funnel, helping people figure out how to utilize security tokens to support their business objectives, but also to create the technology and the infrastructure underneath it to power that. And our take is we do both in parallel, and so it's sort of like constant feedback loop where we're taking requirements from our customers, our clients, we're baking that into the security, the infrastructure, so we ensure that we kind of build an end solution that is actually useful and solves some problems for folks.
Okay. So drill down on that a bit. Infrastructure. What's that? And what kind of things are you going to be doing? So
our vision is that security token industry is going to change finance in a meaningful way, and we can kind of talk about that. But that it's this massive, depending on what numbers you use, hundreds of millions, billions, in pretty short order you hear, and that to power that, we're going to need. There's a whole suite of infrastructure that's going to be needed to power that, for whether that's regionally focused, instrument focused, and so what we're a technology company first and foremost, and we use the services component of our business to help educate the technology and the development, and so then we kind of start with a small number of clients. Right now we have 2 that we're very excited about. They're kind of brother and sister, and we use those to help educate and to help guide us as we build our infrastructure that then we can bring to more and more people and kind of open up in a broader sense.
Okay, we're going to drill down on some of that a bit later, and we will definitely open up for questions. So going back to life before 212, given your background, people are asking, I think very sensibly, so what's the connection between 212 and Wanchain, where you used to work?
One of the premise behind Wanchain was rebuilding finance, and what became pretty clear to us, Rajesh and I, who started 212 together, who was with me at Wanchain as well as Eric, is that the future of finance is going to be built on the back of regulated products, not on this sort of like quasi software utility token. And so if we really wanted to rebuild the financial services industry, that security tokens were going to play a huge role in that. And so we started 212 to kind of be a smaller, nimble entity within the security token space. And now there's a lot of questions about how we're going to leverage Wanchain and how we're going to utilize Wanchain. And the answer is that we're right in the middle of discussions with, I've got a platoon of lawyers that I get to talk to every day, along with, a bunch of, every regulator and regulator's cousin and regulator's sister. And so they all get a say in this because again, these are regulated financial products. And so not only do we kind of think about building our infrastructure with inputs from customers, but we're now actually kind of see the regulators as like a customer that, we're not going to be successful unless they sort of sprinkle their holy water on this and bless this. And so getting them comfortable with different, blockchains and platforms is a challenge and something we're working through. And so it's right now we're sort of in the dance with regulators about, what infrastructure can we use, how we can use it. We have some really close firsthand knowledge with some of the strengths of Wanchain. It's, particularly around its use as an exchange. And so we're excited to do our best to be able to utilize that.
Okay. So you've mentioned security tokens and security token offerings. And for, I don't know, the last year or something, we've been talking about ICOs. So what's the difference? What's the difference between an STO and an ICO?
It's the first principle, and ICOs start from this principle that it's software, and security tokens start from the principle that it's a financial product. And financial products are regulated, and one of the nice things about security tokens, unlike traditional financial products, is that they're programmable. And so now we can not only program the regulation right into them, but we can do other interesting and novel things that, there's a lot of experimentation that can be done with security tokens. In addition to be able to kind of like replicate the old financial instruments, we can also create new instruments that are pretty interesting.
So this kind of programmable securities, is that to do with smart contracts?
Yeah, that's the way you do it. Stellar has some ways of doing it. I haven't totally wrapped my head around, but generally what you do is you bake the regulation right into a smart contract. And so there's kind of like 4 things you care about. So you issue a security token, and you have some issuer requirements. The issuer might say, hey, I don't want this thing to trade in this country, or it has some specific requirements that they want to bake in. If it's trading under, say, Reg D, then you would have like a year lockup, a 12-month lockup that you would program into the asset, and you'd say, hey, this can only be sold to U.S. citizens. And then you have these like 2 other fields where you're checking the receiver and the issuer, the person who's the sender, that to ensure that they're sort of following the rules. And so you don't, normally a lot of that is done by the exchange. And in traditional world, you have like the assets are dumb, whether it's a bond or US dollar or an equity, and the exchange is what underneath it is what handles all the regulation. And so we're seeing this sort of flip where the exchanges become a little bit more dumb, and you have more of the knowledge is like backed into the tokens, which the end result is that it's fairly significant reduction in compliance costs. And so you can start to do more global offerings. You can have potential for greater liquidity and things like that.
So these tokens, are these ERC20s, which I think we've heard all about, or are they something else?
Well, yeah, the EVM's pretty good for this. And so they're putting out now different standards. And so David was talking about you have Harbor's got their own standard, Polymath is a standard, Securitize is a standard, and they all kind of, like the sort of 4 points I was talking to earlier, they all basically do the same thing, but they just kind of do it in different orders and different ways. And so there's a movement, ERC or EIP 140 X. It's like 1401, there's a couple of them, 14023, 3, and they're all an effort to just standardize this. And that's really useful for, particularly around exchanges. Exchanges like standards a lot. It makes it easier to just get tokens listed on exchanges. So it's a deviation of the ERC20 standard.
Okay. So before I open up for some questions, I guess a question about the kind of market we're in, because we've for the last year, I guess we've been in ICO frenzy, raised billions and billions of dollars. We hear these unusual stories all the time about people producing a white paper and getting millions and sometimes billions of dollars without so much to show. But it looks like, at least some people are saying, the market for ICOs is pretty much suddenly pretty much dried up, or at least it's been a big downturn. Other people are saying, well, actually, no, it's not. It's just moved, or it's shifted focus, or shifted geographical region, or changing in some other way. What are you seeing out there that I guess made you? Because I think you initially looked at ICOs and saying that's where we want to be, and you've kind of, before you launched, you pivoted to STOs. So what was the reasoning there?
It's just too much of a regulatory gray area. There are places for using a token to power a decentralized network that has scarce resources, And there's just not as many of them as we think. Not everything needs to live on a decentralized network and really qualifies. And so what we saw a lot of people was just like a big money grab. Like there's a lot of people that were just shoving like these business models into kind of a token or something that sort of resembled a decentralized network just to go raise a bunch of money. So for one, that created a lot of regulatory issues, or at least regulatory uncertainty in the ICO space. And then it also kind of like it created this weird distortion where people didn't and no longer really had to go out and talk to their customer anymore. Too much money being over-resourced can be a problem. I'm a big fan of customer discovery, about like creating businesses that actually solve real-world problems. And to do that, you need to have really close dialogue with your customers. And when money's flowing so easily, you kind of forget that you actually have to have a customer at the end of the day. And what we saw was a lot of just unrealized vision and potential, like a lot of these great white papers that never either came to fruition or that they spent a bunch of money, a bunch of time, and they started building stuff, and then they asked the customer 2 years later and $30 million later, do they want to use this? And the customer says, no, I don't. And they go, oh crap, I probably should have done that, like, you know, after the first page of my white paper. And so I think it's just there's a little bit of like these market cycles that we're going through. I do still think that there's like really important use cases for decentralized networks. Not everything needs to necessarily be a security token, but nonetheless, we have seen this kind of like very aggressive like ramp up and then ramp down, which is just sort of, I think, an indicator overall of the general lack of clarity around regulation. And then also it highlights some of the potentials of these global offerings. One of my personal hypotheses is that a lot of the ramp up in the ICO space was a result of kind of latent demand. Like for years, there's been people outside of the US and like Western Europe that have been eagerly seeking Western securities, but couldn't get access to it. And then this ICO market comes along, and these things sure like look, smell, and quack a lot like securities, and they're global, and they can be issued very freely, and there's like very low, they're cross-border, these things are flying around, and all of a sudden you have this like massive spike in price, and then with like very little utility to show for it. So one of our thought processes is just about, you know, the global access to capital. One of our first principles is that value should flow as freely as information. And so, you know, you see this with Bitcoin, Bitcoin sort of doesn't recognize borders. Like it's not part of the code at all. But with securities, it's very important that they understand where the borders are and how to operate. And with security tokens now, we can sort of bake those regulations right into the tokens themselves and then help value sort of get out of these sort of geographical constraints.
Okay, so I think what you're saying is with security tokens, it kind of instills a bit more order into the world of raising capital through tokens.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Who's got some questions for Dustin?
Yeah. Yeah, well, both. So we kind of look like a security token investment bank a little bit. So we work directly with the issuer. You know, Citibank employs more engineers than Facebook. So banks these days are like heavy technology companies. And so on the front end, we kind of we get on the whiteboard and we say, okay, what are the things you need to build? Like, what are your business objectives? What are you trying to get done? How can we help support that? We help construct the financial instruments themselves. And then we help build the exchange and the infrastructure because, well, that's sort of like, because a lot of that doesn't exist yet today. Or if it does, there's very small numbers. And so as an issuer, it's pretty risky business being a security token issuer these days and just hoping that the infrastructure is going to catch up or that there will be an exchange that lists you. You kind of look at Binance and some of the like extortionary fees they charge to get listed on their exchange. I mean, at the time there was what, 100? How many exchanges were there? 100 exchanges? But how many security token exchanges are there? So we kind of foresee this, like there's a lot of people issuing and just not that many people building infrastructure. So while we kind of started off as an issuer, we quickly realized, hey, it's super important that we're a technology company that can help support this.
You're saying that there will be regulation, and there are people sitting who've gone through century or whatever of regulation, like in Switzerland. They're looking over all these use cases. You had some negative news. Somebody here had a negative comment about how slow they are, but I don't think they will be.
We don't.
So
We don't need any new laws, which is the nice thing, is that there's no new laws that need to be created. I'm not sure I understand your question.
You're assuming you're going to get regulated, I thought.
Yeah, but we can fall under the existing laws.
But write those into the contract. I mean, you're going to have all these coins going around with that contract in there.
Yep.
Make a change overnight.
Yeah, yeah. The laws are actually pretty good. Like Reg D, like so. Dave was talking about Reg A Plus. Like Reg A Plus is a great law, and it's basically like a mini IPO. You can sell to accredited, unaccredited. There's no lockup. $50 million. The problem is that that's the one place where there is regulatory approval. Unlike Reg D, they actually have to approve it, and so they haven't approved any yet. Any security token Reg A offerings, but you still have Reg D, which you don't actually have to. You just file. You say, okay, we're doing a Reg D offering. We're selling to accrediteds in the United States. SEC, just here's a heads up, but you don't have to ask them. You just let them know.
How do you get around like things like the 99 investor limit on some of these things?
Well, that's I think the 99 is for SPVs. It's usually 2,000 for investor limit. So if you break 2,000, and it's also just for, if you break 2,000, then you have to start doing quarterly reporting, 10Ks and 10Qs, things like that. So that's really more of like a discussion you have with the issuer about, how much do you want this to be decentralized and the ownership to be decentralized? And there's a trade-off. If you really want thousands and thousands of people to own this, then you're going to have to sack up and pay, which is, it's actually not as like crazy as you think to like pay for these the quarterly reports. It's kind of a pain in the ass a little bit, but if you really want to have 5,000 people owning your equity and you're like a big company, like it's not the worst thing in the world, and you can program that in. That's part of the sort of like issuer compliance. Is you could say, okay, I only want, because I'm gonna say I'm planning on doing like 5 more rounds in the future, and I have this many employees that need to hold it. So for this round, I'm only gonna sell to 500 people. And so like you can make like a minimum account balance could be one of the requirements, is that you have a minimum number of these tokens, and then. Right, so I can't, like I sort of can't transfer to you unless you also had that minimum account balance, and so yeah, you can control the limit using the smart contract.
There's a question over there, then I'll get to you.
Are you talking about like liquidity? Yeah. So I mean, that's that's part of the value prop too. Is we help. We also tend to look for people that already have like significant user bases and things like that they can leverage.
Well, then we'll do you, Nicole, but we'll get this one.
Yeah, this is where it gets really useful to have a background in entrepreneurship, because what most everyone in the space comes into is they look for the biggest market. And so everyone is like the herd going for real estate. And so everyone's like, the biggest market in the world, like look at this. But to me, it's like too big of a market. Real estate is, it's huge. I mean, if you can get it, but your chances of getting more than like 1 or 2% of that market are very small. And as an entrepreneur, ideally your goal is to create nearly a monopoly in a market, like to create an offering that like captures like 70 to 80% of a value in a market, and that's just never going to happen in real estate. That's also an area that like our team doesn't have a lot of competency in, so we sort of said, okay, leave real estate to the other folks, and then we go hunting for markets that we think that we can dominate and win. One of those, like our first client, is in the commodity space, and so like there's a specific commodity that we're really interested in, and there's some like novel technology tied to that, and so we're like, okay, that's a market that we can attack, we can win, we can actually use the technology to help the company like go after this market, and so we think very like deeply about like entrepreneurial principles when we're working with our clients and trying to figure out, which markets are we going after first.
And when are you going to be able to talk about that first customer?
When it's ready, yeah. Yeah, we're more of like a show versus tell kind of approach, and so that's part of the reason why we haven't been talking too much about things. But
Whereas Nicole.
I mean, we've been working with this first client, this kind of two clients for months now. I mean, like that's part of the issue is that we don't think it's like the industry's ready for scale yet. It's really more about finding small groups of customers that have like meaningful pain points and really sort of getting in and helping them solve their problems. And then, so it's like a traditional, lots of companies start heavy services and then they move to technology. So you sort of productize a service. So right now it's like very much about education. We're learning with the client about what they're doing. And then that time will drop over time as we kind of get our infrastructure set up. We start productizing things and like moving as much as we can over onto the tech stack. And then we'll get faster and faster at it. But right now it's very bespoke. No. Yeah, we're pretty focused on STOs right now. There is like one there's a potential like network within this STO that we're looking at, but even then we kind of like would bring in another partner to help architect that, trying to kind of stay in our lane with our STO expertise that we're building.
So is the foundation of your STO, is it Regulation A? Is that the SEC foundation that you're using?
No, it's it's a combination A, D, S. Those are the three, and so it's a combined. Like I said, though, the Reg A, none of them have been approved yet, and so it's kind of uncertain about whether or not any will get or when. I've been hearing rumors that the SEC is starting to like warm up to this, but nonetheless, we haven't seen any go through yet. So right now, most of it's Reg D and Reg S. For anybody that doesn't know, Reg D is basically if you're in the United States and you issue to U.S. investors, that's Reg D, and it requires that the investors are accredited. Reg S is international offerings, and the only requirement is that you follow whatever laws that are in that country, and so it's like country by country. For example, if they don't have any accreditation laws, then you can sell to anybody. If they have investment minimums or lockups, it sort of like varies on a country by country basis.
But with both, you've got to make sure that you abide by what the regs say. So you can't, if you're doing a Reg D, you can't start selling to people like me with no money.
Right. Yeah. So Reg D is accredited only. Yeah. So yeah, and so it's yeah, and then they both have the 2,000 limit. So it's like the collective between the Reg D and all the Reg S's. You have to keep under 2,000 if you're selling equity, and if you go over that, then you have to start doing the quarterly reporting, the 10Ks and 10Qs, which is kind of expensive. Yeah, David? No, we're definitely not going to make our own. We're going to follow the 140X standard. Whatever one emerges from there, we're going to grab. I hear rumor that they might expand it, that they might raise the cap to like 5 or 15 million or something, and then it'd be usable. By now, what's it like, million? Yeah, yeah, it's kind of tough. So we haven't. Yeah. Yeah, for this client, we haven't been thinking about it too much. Yeah, in the back. Yeah, so there's we're looking at debt offerings as well as and even some commodity offerings, and so it's a mix of all of the above, and there's also some potential too to bake what look like kind of utility-like features into the security tokens and into the financial instruments, because now we still have this like programmability thing that we never had before with traditional equity, and so there's, I think, an opportunity to innovate with some of these products. I think we got to be very careful with how we do it, and like the first few products that really get the blessing of the regulators are going to be, drives right down the middle of the fairway, just kind of like, hey, not much to see here. This is just like the thing that you know and are comfortable with, but it's on a blockchain. It's represented by a token. But Yeah, but as we move forward, I think we can really start to push the boundaries of like what a financial product looks like and what a traditional sort of network token looks like. And so I think that there's like some convergence here that'll be really interesting. We tend to, when we create new technologies, we just sort of like we project it onto the old thing. We say, okay, this is a new technology. Like look at Bitcoin, right? Gold is a $7 trillion market. So everyone at Bitcoin says, you know, Bitcoin should be worth like 7 trillion. My answer is like, well, if it's better than gold, shouldn't it be worth more than 7 trillion? Like, if you're going to disrupt the old thing, like you should shoot beyond the old thing. And so I think that with financial instruments, that's what our longer term vision is, to really kind of innovate within the space and to figure out how we can take traditional financial instruments and do new things with them, because we think that'll like unlock lots of value other than just replicating the old.
So you spoke about programming these tokens, right? They're all programmed differently to match the needs of the users. Do they necessarily have to run on different blockchains as part of the same infrastructure, or can they run on the same blockchain?
Oh, they can run on different blockchains. It depends on, you know, a little bit depends on how we construct our exchange infrastructure that we're building. But we do, you know, we come from the interoperability space with WAN chain, right? Like, so the future we see is also one where these blockchains are talking to each other, and we know that different blockchains have different value propositions and characteristics that are beneficial. And so we want to think about it more broadly. And if you get too locked into one blockchain, it can be, I think it's, you know, it can be a little dangerous. Probably fiat, yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess it depends on, I think there's certain offerings that, if you're going more institutional, more like, it's probably fiat, but if you're really targeting like the retail crypto community, then you're probably doing more Bitcoin and Ethereum denominations.
Okay, any more?
It's just what you know. You know, if you're Mexico, you denominate everything in pesos, right? If you're an institutional investor, you don't think in Bitcoin, ETH, you think in dollars. I think we're getting to the point where many of us in this room are starting to think in like Bitcoin and ETH terms, as like in like unit terms, but the broad populace still is very much dollar based. Well, they like the first interaction with them. It was interesting because they present us something that we decided we helped them kind of see some of the errors with some of the logic that they were sort of initially thinking about, and it highlighted to us how many people were looking at the space from the wrong lens. And so it required a lot of education and a lot of kind of guidance over time into saying, okay, this is the viable path forward. But it also kind of brought with it a lot of the misconceptions of the sort of like the ICO craze about what things belonged on a blockchain, what things should be decentralized, you know, why we're going through this process in the first place. And so yeah, it's been a good, we're lucky that they are very innovative, and they're sort of like everything they do is kind of on the edge of technology, and so they're very receptive to new ideas and new ways of thinking about things and new ways of capitalizing their business. Yeah, we will. Yeah, we eat our own dog food. Yeah, we'll do security token A round when we raise our A round next year. So, yeah, I think we kind of have to. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Any more?
Have you put any thought into securities in the venture capital space?
Like fund ownership, or yeah, I think. You know, everyone gets to benefit from global offerings and liquidity, including funds. I think there's some kind of thinking to go through. Okay, I haven't quite figured out, is it better to tokenize the LP or the GP interest or both? Like what's your angle there? But then you have kind of a lot of the same issues that you have. Security tokens have those problems, right? You have the 12-month lockup is kind of a buzzkill. Like we're so used to like putting money into stuff, and then we got to wait 2 or 3 months at most, and then it's trading and we can watch it. It's just fun, right? Like it's kind of annoying to have to buy and then like just sit around for a year. By 12 months later, you forgot about it, and so it's I think there's some. It's possible some of the regulations in the U.S. kind of like shorten that window. Some of the benefits are maybe that you get kind of more serious long-term investors, and less people trying to just sort of like flip stuff on retail folks. But there's there's sort of some systemic. It's going to be a long road. Like the security token industry is all the infrastructure we have right now is all built for Bitcoin and ICOs, and like some of it can be transferred over, but a lot of it needs to be built scratch. And if you think about how much infrastructure powers the existing financial services industry, it's kind of it's daunting, but it's at the same time it's just like we just sort of like walk around all day seeing opportunities. And so that's why I'm lucky to have Rajesh Gopi here as co-founder, Eric Anderson, our first employee. We work here in Austin, and it's fun going to work with these guys. We're just sort of like getting to brainstorm and solve problems every day. So.
Okay, final question. So you're building lots of infrastructure. So are you going to be kind of building that yourself in-house, or are you looking to pull in existing products or partner with companies that have got something that you need? What's your kind of philosophy for developing your offering and pushing it out?
Yeah, our philosophy is we're a technology company first, and so we build absolutely as much as we can. And but we do have a couple partnerships, and part of that is just also just building that internal muscle. Like it's if you're a technology company, there's certain people you hire, there's certain processes you have, and so we're baking that into our culture like from day one. It's kind of an exercise for us whenever we can build something. But there are certain things that like a lot of the KYC and AML stuff. There's partnerships we have there. Like that's just kind of like there's some liability there that we just don't want to take on ourselves. But for the most part, we're a technology company that builds security token infrastructure.
Okay. And you'll be back first quarter to talk about your first customer.
Sure. Yeah. Hopefully sooner than that. But
right.
yeah.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Dustin. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Okay, so with that, I think we're sort of the end of the formal part of the proceedings. I think a couple of us might end up downstairs having a beer, but thank you everyone for coming and for all of your comments and input. And we will be back here with a meetup in, what's next month? November, middle of November. I don't yet have a full program for that, but I've got half of it. So if anyone is interested in presenting on something huge and major in November, in November 15th, I think, let me know. And in the meantime, lots of Austin Blockchain Month events to go to. And they're all on our website, austinblockchaincollective.com. Hope to see you at many of those. Thanks a lot. Cheers. I challenged him about a week